Hi everyone. We're really excited to have you join us today. My name is Eric Schneider. I'm the VP of Marketing at Strigo, and I'm honored to be joined tonight by Donna Weber, the President of Springboard Solutions, and Ryan Schneider, Lead Education Engineer at VMware. Our world has been sort of turned on its head over the past few months, and our aim during this webinar is to provide you some practical tips on how to best align your customer training to be successful within this new reality. So we do expect this to be an interactive session, and we're counting on you to share with us your thoughts and questions. So in the spirit of a lively session, let's start with a couple quick questions to get to know you a little bit better. Our first question is, from where in the world are you joining us today? Here's an opportunity to answer that question. So Donna, in the meantime, you want to share with us where you're joining us, and Ryan as well?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Donna Weber and I'm joining from California. I'm in Palo Alto, just in the heart of Silicon Valley.
Hi everyone, my name is Ryan Schneider and I'm joining from the US in Florida, in Central Florida, just north of Orlando.
And I'm Eric and I'm joining from Tel Aviv, Israel. So we're just beginning our evening over here right now. So I think we have enough people who have voted, so let's share the results. And it looks like we've got a really nice mix of people coming from all over the world, which is really great to see. And I think it's an accurate reflection of, basically the essence of what we're talking about today, which is remote customer training. And when we're talking about a smaller world coming together, I see that that's reflected today in terms of our attendees as well. So that's great. So I would like to ask a second question, and that is just to understand, with these folks coming from all over, what sort of role do you play within your organization? So we'll launch that poll right now and give you an opportunity to answer. And it looks like our numbers are coming in, lots of customer success managers, lots of other roles. People are still voting, so we'll give them another moment to do that. And let's show those results so you understand who else is joining you on today's webinar. So here you can see that we've got a wide variety of people, which is really great because, when you think about customer training these days and the impact it has across the organization, this is also an accurate reflection. So it's really cool to see people from all over the world in different roles joining us for today. So thank you again for taking the time. And now that we know a little bit about you, I'd like Donna and Ryan to take a short minute for introductions. So Donna.
Thank you so much, Eric. My name is Donna Weber. I'm the president of Springboard Solutions. I launched Springboard 4 years ago this month, and I help high growth tech companies create customers for life through scalable programs that help you get your customers immediately adopting your products and wanting more.
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan Schneider. I'm a lead education engineer at VMware in the Cloud Native group. I'm an instructor and curriculum design engineer, and I help companies, both small enterprises and large ones, be successful in their cloud native space and specifically with Kubernetes. Prior to that, I worked for other startups such as Elasticsearch, and I was a Java engineer and architect for many years and also an adjunct professor. Nice to see you all today.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Donna. And again, I'm Eric. I head marketing at Strigo, and we offer the world's first customer training cloud that combines classroom capabilities with virtual lab environments to create a consistent hands-on training experience, regardless of whether you're conducting self-paced learning, in person, or virtual instructor-led training. And as you look at the slide, you can see that over 3 years, we've been fortunate to partner with some great companies, such as the ones that are below, to deliver over 2.5 million hours of training to more than 50,000 users. So with introductions out of the way, I'd like to pass the baton over to Donna to review the agenda and to start to dive into the session. Donna?
Thank you so much. Okay, so while remote training has been around for a while, you might feel overwhelmed trying to figure out yet another way to do things during these challenging times. Don't worry, in this session, you learn how to get your teams and your customers ready for hands-on remote training. Ryan and I will be sharing best practices and tactical tips for you to embrace this opportunity to enable your customers no matter where in the world you are and no matter where in the world they are, as we shift from the classroom to the living room. All right, so first of all, I want to get clear about what we're focusing on in our session today. We're talking about instructor-led, hands-on product training that is delivered remotely. Now, you might call that virtual instructor-led training. I've called it live online at several companies I've worked at. You might call it remote classroom, synchronous learning, distance learning. And if you have other names that you use, please type them in the chat now. We're not talking about self-paced, asynchronous, on-demand type of training. You know, that totally has its place. It totally has a lot of value, but just to be clear, we're not talking about that today. It's all about the instructor-led, hands-on, interactive training that's delivered remotely. Right, I don't see any other name. I don't see any other names you're using in the chat, so I guess we have them covered. So today we're covering 5 simple steps for how to be a champion delivering live online classes. 1 is smoothly converting your team and your customers to a remote training approach. 2 is designing effective and interactive remote training sessions. 3 is preparing instructors and learners for successful classes. 4, delivering interactive hands-on classes to engage learners. And 5 is gathering feedback to improve remote training offerings. So we're going to dive into each of those. We start with change. Now, maybe your customers and your internal teams are embracing this new world, or maybe they're not. Don't worry, you're not alone. This is the time to embrace remote instructor-led training, and don't defer it. And because it's going to serve you now and in the future. It's a great option. It's not just something to plug in during a crisis. It's something that will really serve you, your instructors, your customers, your company in the long term. Plus, there are so many awesome tools out like Strigo to help you deliver a great offering and to be successful as you transition to the remote delivery. So questions, if you can type in the chat, are you facing resistance from your customers and your internal teams right now? Type in yes or no. We're getting some yeses and some no's, mostly no's, but some yeses. All right, thanks everyone for your feedback. That's great to hear. Mostly no. One, Matt says it depends on the geo. And next question, are you deferring any instructor-led training right now, waiting for the shelter in place to end? So a little bit of deferral, but mostly people are forging ahead, doing more than ever. That's awesome. And like, you know, like in any situation, there's challenges and there's opportunities, and remote delivery is a huge opportunity. All right, next poll, we have a poll. So we're curious about before the COVID-19 crisis, how many of your classes were delivered remotely? And Eric put out the poll. Was it over 75%, 51 to 75 less? So type in how many, select the option in the poll. And we'll get a feel for, to see how things are shifting.
So people are still voting. We've got a really wide variety here. So we'll give folks one more moment to cast their votes. They're still coming in. It definitely is an interesting question to see how, you know, the impact of this this pandemic on what we're doing for business. So here we go. I will end the poll now, and let's share those results for everybody.
Yeah, so majority is less than 25%. So that's probably going to be flipped on its head now. That's about 75% will be remote. So like I say, this is a great opportunity. And then we have another question here. So we're curious about the challenges you're facing in delivering remote classes. Is it change in the organizational mindset? Is it more internal challenges? Is it the customers that are blocking you moving forward on this? Is the technology, your inability to scale? And Eric, go ahead and put out that poll. Yeah. Or do you not have big challenges? Are you able to moving forward into this? And you can select as many that apply.
So once again, we've got a lot of people voting, and it looks like it's going to be, these results are going to be across the board, which I don't think comes as any surprise. There are lots of different challenges, and it makes this discussion even more valuable to help us understand how best to address these challenges. So we'll give folks another minute as there's still a lot of people voting. And let's publish the poll.
All right, so at the top one is the lack of technology solutions. So that's great, we'll address that. And any questions you have around that, we can address that today. And then customer receptiveness, so we'll address that too. And I'm glad to see 15% don't have any big challenges, and there's just 13% with the internal mindset. So with that, let's dive into some change management best practices. So while live online or virtual instructor-led training might be new to you, it's not a new area. In fact, about 8 years ago, I transitioned all of my instructor-led public classrooms training to remote delivery, and I found the change pretty seamless. I'm happy to share more about that experience. So here are 4 areas of best practices for the change management. It's really important to have clear and frequent communication for both internal teams and for your customers. It's really important to share the benefits and the with them, the what's in it for me for folks. So for example, internal teams, hey, you get reduced travel, less time away from home. Well, we all have less time away from home these days. And you get, as an instructor, you get a lot more variety. You get to build out more skills. There's professional development, and you can deliver classes all over the world. Like I've delivered classes at 7 a.m. Pacific to North America and Europe, and then 4 p.m. that same afternoon to the West Coast, North America, and Asia Pac. And so it's a great way to touch the world. And then customers, again, you get that reduced travel and they don't have to be away. It's less expensive. And they can also dive into the topics they need just when they need them if you design your remote training right. And then ideally you build out a good go-to-market. So just because you build a new offering doesn't mean people are going to know about it or benefit from it. And that's the whole area we can talk about, and we suggest you stay tuned for future webinars on this topic. Ryan, what are your thoughts about the change management?
Yeah, it's, it really helps to drive home those points, like some of the non-trivial ones. Like, for example, when you try to schedule within person, a lot of times time is of the essence, right? People need a particular group to be ramped up by a certain date for maybe product launches and other things. And finding a logistical, the schedule that works for everybody, finding the conference room, the building, people getting there, you can get to that faster with usually the virtual training or the virtual instructor led. And I find that's a big thing to also push that resonates with people.
That's a great point. When I was running customer education at Jaspersoft and Tibco, when we had the classroom public classes, we were scheduling and canceling and rescheduling, and there was so much time and cancellation fees. And we just got rid of all of that with the live online. So next is design. When designing instructor-led courses for remote delivery, it's important not to overthink it. Whether it's delivered remotely or in person, the classes require the same components to be impactful. What you need, no matter how you deliver classes, are good course design, instructionally sound content, and interactivity. And that means clear learning objectives and activities for your participants to stay engaged. So I'm curious, we have a majority of CSMs on the session. I'm curious if you know about good course design. Is that familiar to you? Type in yes or no in the chat. So we're getting a lot of yeses, a few nos. And if folks want to know more, I have some articles on it or could point you to some great resources. And if that's a need for future webinars even, that's something we can explore. I really like to emphasize that remote training does not equal a large webinar where you try to fit as many people into one session. Like today, hey, this is a webinar. We've got lots of people on the session, but you're all muted and it's a lecture. I'm talking at you. you're not engaged, it's not interactive. And that's great for sharing information, but it's not really a learning environment where you're going to retain what you learn, and we're going to talk more about that. So we really recommend small interactive classes. And here are the best practices as you design your remote delivery. So, you want to know your audience, and you really don't want to fall into the trap of offering one-size-fits-all fire hose training. When I started at Jaspersoft several years ago, we had one course that lasted 5 days for every kind of user, covering everything about the product. And we had professional services consultants delivering the training, and they talked for 5 days and had a sore throat at the end of it. And the people got a lot of information, but they didn't really retain anything. So rather than covering everything in one course, we really recommend that you define your audiences, know all the different user types, and build out content specific to them. Now, if you already have well-designed interactive courses and you've already built out courses for different types, you really don't have much work to do to move to virtual training. Now, you want to make it interactive. As we said, that means smaller classes. We recommend an instructor-student ratio of about 1 to 10 to 20 participants, depending on the complexity of your products. If you're going over 15, I would say you want a co-teacher or a moderator so they can be busy kind of behind the scenes, making sure everyone's engaged and has any issues resolved, and they can start with polls and things like that. And then you want to chunk it up. So we started talking about this already, but folks don't want to be, maybe you're used to delivering full day classes. Chunk it down into, half day classes or 2-hour sessions over many days. And the great things about that is you can even assign homework or activity to do in between, and people can even learn better through those more modularized sessions. And then pick your tools. As with any project, you need a good set of tools. And the good news is there are great vendors out there, including Strigo, to provide all you need to deliver seamless virtual classes. You don't have to figure this out on your own. I highly recommend you don't try to build the tools internally. Been there, done that, and had a lot of pain. I highly recommend you move forward with best-in-class tools that are already out there. Let's hear your tactical tips, Ryan.
Yeah, so the chunk it up or the smaller size is definitely something to strive for in general, but even more importantly with virtual and remote training. Not only does it sort of allow people to sort of feel like they've come to an end point by the end of that half day or full day, but it also enables a flexibility of the scheduling that we'll talk about more later on. And as opposed to if you have this whole 5-day thing where you assume everybody's going to be in one room, that's now you're making it as a troublesome thing to schedule virtually. Another big thing is about the interactivity. A lot of times there's whiteboard sessions that people do during delivery of a training, and doing a whiteboard with a tool and on the computer, it can work, but sometimes people aren't as comfortable doing it, some of your instructors and your staff. So I find taking those things that you used to do on the whiteboard and having a diagram in the slides and in the material for people to reference, you can still do the whiteboarding, but you have that end state diagram already written up and there for people to look at, to reference and go back to. So I find that to be another thing to help with the interactivity and cross the bridge of the virtual versus in person.
Great tips. Thank you, Ryan.
And Donna, I'll just add that Joris has asked a question in terms of the ideal chunk. What is the appropriate amount of time do you guys feel from your experience? Is it 1 hour, 2 hours? Joris would be curious to know what your thoughts are about that.
What are your thoughts, Ryan?
So there's 2 parts of it. One is from the material of like how long a session is, like a chapter or a lecture or a module. I tend to say 20 to 40 minutes is like the most you'd want to talk at all. And then when we talk about the delivery, which we're going to talk about coming up, I like to do 4-hour chunks as most. So a full day class becomes 2 half days, which helps from a time zone perspective, as well as people burning out at the screen, and it allows them to accomplish other tasks during the day.
Yeah, and those are great ideas. It's really also dependent on what your audience and your what you're training them on. I have done full day live online classes, and we have lunch breaks and breaks. So you know you're still having breaks and time off. But then we moved it to half days, and that was very successful. So I would say 2 hours to 4 hours. Okay, I want to just add one more thing about know your audience. When you're designing courses, really think about the jobs your users are trying to do. So you're not just covering about, you don't want to just talk about your products. You're not just talking about how to log in and navigate your product. You really are looking at helping your users be successful in their jobs. And we can talk more about that if you like. Now, why is this interactivity so important? Let's explore the learning pyramid. So you'll notice that we've got some passive learning here, which is lecture up to demonstration. Those are, that includes common approaches such as a show and tell, a product walkthrough, a webinar, what we're doing today. And there's some value in there, but people don't really retain what they learn. And what I see at a lot of companies is that CSMs are giving customers a walkthrough. Here, let me show you how the product is. And they're doing a walkthrough, but because the retention for that, giving a lecture, maybe doing a demo, you're only getting up to 30% retention. And as a result of that, people are dependent on the CSMs and support teams to figure out the product. Like one company I talked to a couple weeks ago said, hey, you know, we help our users get their first campaign built, and then they need help on their second one and their third one, and you're never really getting their users able to be successful on their own. However, when you include interactive ways that really engage learners, like discussion, practice by doing, which is labs, we're going to talk more about that, and then that awesome approach, teaching others, the retention increases dramatically, and so they learn, they can share that knowledge to other folks on their teams, and you're not incurring all that extra cost internally to keep supporting your customers with those basic how-tos. Ryan, anything you want to add to that?
You covered it on most of the aspects here, and the teaching others is is a huge part. You know, with the virtual training, you can enable more people, and then they can vouch for a positive experience of it if other groups want to continue and take it. And I find that, you know, just like that friend testimonial really helps too.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, oh, and I just want to go back to this now. One of the reasons why the passive approaches are so common is because it's a lot easier and it's a lot faster to develop and to deliver. So it's easy to put some slides together and talk to them, and to do good interactive course development takes longer. But as I said, you get so much more from it. So the labs are a key component to the virtual product training. They provide the hands-on component that increases retention to about 80%. And we highly recommend you build out some real-world examples in training environments to give your users a great experience. So for example, at my previous company, Jaspersoft, it was a business intelligence analytics tool. We had a client server environment built out in the training environment. We had a whole database. We built out like a food mart database, and so we could build out these scenarios where you're a grocery store and you're tracking your inventory and you're ordering. I built out environments for other companies where we had developer tools like Eclipse. You know, I've tried to build out all sorts of things where people had to download a virtual machine. They had to install everything before the class. That always failed. And once I got a remote training environment, it was just seamless, and it was just awesome. People are not stepping on each other's toes if they're creating records. Everyone has their environment in isolation. Anything you want to add to that, Ryan?
Yeah, so one of the nice things about labs, and all of the courses I've always created have always been that rough 50-50 ratio of 50% lab, 50% lecture content. And when you have the labs, right, it means that you can address and have people learn stuff in the lab that you didn't talk about during lecture. It doesn't just have to reinforce the lecture. So that way the lecture, the time you're actually taking, when we went back to that pyramid that Donna had up, you can focus on the concepts and the discussion pieces and the how and the why. And then the lab can focus on more of the, all right, here's the options and here's how you do it and this. And you don't have to get all into that redundancy and all that mundane stuff during the lecture.
Great points. And then we like to, rather than talking for 2 hours and then having people do a lab for 2 hours, we like to really break it up. So the brain works best when there's new information around every 15 minutes. So break it up so that you have your lecture, your demo, and then a lab on one topic. Then the next topic, lecture, demo, lab. That's a great way to move forward. Okay, time for our next poll. So we're curious how many tools that you currently have to deliver your remote training. Are you using one tool, 5 or more? We're curious how many tools you currently use if you deliver remote training right now. All right, we'll take a moment to add to the poll and we'll see where you're at.
Yeah, one more moment. We'll still some people voting, I see. Numbers are still
Thank you,
coming
Eric.
in. Sure thing. Okay, let's end the poll. Thanks to everybody for voting, and here are the results.
So 2 is pretty common. 1, a few people have more than 4. Okay, great. That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. All right.
And I think that really reflects sort of the reality that people are seeing today when it comes to the disjointed experience of providing customer training. I think that Strigo provides customers a unified platform. It allows trainers and students both to focus on the actual instruction rather than spending most of their time on managing all these different applications that they need for a classroom when they don't have our platform, such as what you were talking about, Donna. So I think that unlike other tools, Strigo's platform combines communication, content sharing, collaboration functions, and live labs in a unified environment. And this really sort of mirrors a face-to-face training experience. So we're proud that our customers are scaling their training, and they're doing it without compromising the quality of their instruction, especially in the case of virtual instructor-led training.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if anyone wants to learn more, great. Thank you, Eric. Next is prepare. So as with any performance, you want to be fully prepared before showtime. It's the same with delivering training, whether it's in person or over the interwebs, as my husband calls it. Oh, I keep getting muted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so we recommend these following best practices to help set yourself up and your participants up for successful remote classes. So 1, we talked about this earlier, but set expectations and communicate them frequently. So just like in the change management, some folks will never have taken remote training before. It's going to be really foreign to them. Some of your users might be veterans. Some of your instructors might be veterans, and some might be new. So you want everyone to feel confident about the tools that they're using to quickly get down to learning the actual content. Now, I like to set expectations on the website, have some details in the course description. When people receive registration confirmations, all the details of what they need. I've created FAQs that I've put on the website, and I'll link to that in the registration. I send out a get ready email 2 days ahead of training and a follow up 1 hour before class starts. And you might need people to log in, test their environments, do something. So if there's something that they need to do before class starts and making sure they really know how to do it, you might have them email you to say, yes, I've completed those tasks. You might build out some short videos if needed. And then learn your tools. So, if you're using, those 2, 3, 4 different tools, you really want to know all the options so you can maximize their benefits. And you want to be ready to roll on class on day 1 of class, so that you're not stumbling at the beginning of class going, oh wait, what do I do? How do I navigate around this? Have dry runs, practice on your own, so that you're really able to navigate around this new dashboard easily. And then I like to communicate to folks and as part of the set expectations, how we're going to communicate during the session. We'll talk more about that later, but you want to know, like, oh, do we have audio? How can they submit questions? Like today, you know, there's a Q&A section, there's a chat. Can people raise hands, clap? Are there whiteboards, breakouts? So you really want to know all the things that you can do. Personally, I like to keep everyone using audio during these small interactive classes, so it's just like in a classroom. As an instructor, I have a cordless headset. I like to, if I'm not on camera, I like to walk around and kind of stay active and use my hands and not be tethered to the computer. You know, it's really essential that you test everything beforehand and join the class early so that you can resolve any issues. And you know, what I have found, usually I'll get ready the day before, I reboot my computer, and then there's always something that morning. So you want to have a backup plan. You got to have your plan B in case something happens. You might have you know, a way to hardline into the internet. You might have different headphones ready to go. You might have a moderator who can jump in and move things forward. All right, what about you, Ryan? What are your tips and tricks?
Yeah, all great stuff. I do the same kind of items that Donna mentioned. And then I'm also a big proponent of preparing your physical environment that you want to teach from. Everything from camera position to the room you're going to do it in, to whether you're going to stand. I tend, you know, when I teach live in front of people on site, I like to stand. And I find that if you stand when you're teaching virtually, it gets you in that mindset as opposed to sitting down. You start to get into just work from home mode, sort of, right? Or at the desk mode. So I like to stand, get this, I have a stand set desk, and then good quality microphone, etc. Because, you know, people are going to be listening to you for many hours potentially, and getting it all there. You're talking at the camera. You got to be comfortable that whole time because you're putting on the show for your audience. And I just like to make sure that all that is taken care of so that when it's time, I can focus on questions, timing, and the delivery.
Yeah, those are great tips. And I have my tea and my water right here. I like to stand as well. I'm a big fan of putting real clothes on. I know we're all working from home right now, but you know, it helps me feel professional by putting some real clothes on. Okay, and then also we'll get to this a little more during the delivery, but as I said, I like the audio, and then that way people can hear other voices, so they're not just listening to your one voice for hours on end. They learn better that way. I have also sent out a little packet to my participants with like, hey, print out this do not disturb sign. You can place it on your back, you can place it on your chair, you can place it on your door if you have one. With reminders, you know, for instructors and participants, turn your ringers off, put your computer in do not disturb, shut down any applications so that you're not going to be distracted, so that you're not going to be using up CPUs. So really prepare like this pristine environment, just like, you know, Ryan was saying, in a classroom, you're not going to have your phone on and your mail up and you're doing emails in between. You really are on. Okay, so now it's show time. Let's explore best practices for delivering remote instructor-led training. So join early. Like for example, Ryan and Eric and I all joined 15 minutes early today. You might want to join 30 to 45 minutes early, just especially the first session, if it's multi-sessions, just to make sure you're there. You might have, I've had students join early the first day just to make sure they have access to all the environments. Shut down all those distractions I was just talking about. And I like to start my classes with introductions, you know, have everyone share, maybe on camera if that works, but definitely through the audio. You know, where are they? What are their expectations? It's maybe an interesting fact about themselves. It's a great way to connect, and it's a great way for the instructor to know what the needs of each attendee are. Like, let's say if it's you find out, oh, everyone's real beginners, I'm going to just kind of deliver my stuff a little more slowly and thoroughly, or I can speed up if they are veterans. And I like to have the camera on, at least for the introductions, and switch them off if there's bandwidth issues. Provide a quick overview of the remote classroom environment you're in. Okay, we're going to be doing labs, we're going to do demos, we're going to do lectures, and here's all the different way you're going to see, here's how you're going to interact, these are my expectations. Do you want people to hold their questions till the end? Are there going to be breaks? How long will the breaks be? Will you be calling on individuals? Do you want to talk through audio or chat? So all of that. I like to have a timer up on the screen during labs and breaks, because if you say, okay, we'll join in 15 minutes, you know, you might have people in 5 different time zones. If you don't say exactly when the break's starting, everyone has their own idea of what 15 minutes looks like. So having a timer, and you can find those online, and just so people know, okay, countdown, oh, we're resuming in 5 minutes. And then, as we said before, with the chunking things down, it's helpful to change things up every 15 minutes or so to keep people engaged, and calling out individuals to hear their questions, get their input. And then again, if you need a moderator, you know, if that's going to help the instructor stay focused, and then the moderator can be in the background, kind of monitoring chat, helping people get connected, whatever's needed, so that you're not like delaying the whole class because one person needs a little extra help. All right, Ryan, what are your delivery best practices?
Yeah, all of those. And I do want to emphasize a few items that Donna mentioned, and as well as some new things. So one is you want to be comfortable with long pauses, right? The ability for a person to type an answer in a chat, to come off mute, etc. There's a longer natural delay there, and you don't want people to miss that. So be comfortable with when you ask a question that you want answered, being comfortable with that long pause. It's perfectly fine. People will appreciate it. Additionally, a lot of times when we teach in front of on site, right, we can sort of throw out really quick rhetorical things, have people raise their hand or a rhetorical question, and people sort of chime in at the same time. That's harder in a virtual environment. So I like to be very explicit when I'm sort of asking those questions about whether I actually want the audience, the attendees, to try to answer it, either in chat or coming off mute. Or do I want it to say, you know, hey, think about this to yourself and then go forward. Sometimes you want that and sometimes you don't, and making it clear for people helps a lot. And then the timers is a big one. You know, to get people back in the room, so to speak, right? You can't walk out in the hallway or sort of say, hey, everybody, we're going to start. So putting those times of what you're doing, what you're working on, you know, are we working on just lab 1 or lab 1 and 2? Are we doing lab 1 and lunch, for example? And then when you expect to come back. That allows people to get up and take a walk outside, for example, to break up the monotony of being in front of the computer and so on and so forth. So like I said, everything Donna mentioned, all very good. And I just wanted to emphasize those other 2 things that I find help a lot.
Those are awesome, Ryan. Thank you. All right, so next is review. And if this remote delivery is new to you, then it's really helpful to get the feedback so that you can keep iterating and improving your offering. So for review, the best practices are to set goals, provide short surveys, and then act on trends. So one, you know, set some goals so you know where you're going and you know what improvements you're making, and you can share your progress along the way, and you know where to adjust. Now, you know, one of the challenges with remote is you don't get that kind of anecdotal chatting over break while you're eating cookies in the afternoon. So we highly recommend some post-course surveys. But as you know, we're all a bit survey fatigued these days. So keep them real short. Really find out what you want to know that's going to help you improve, and then make sure you act on the feedback. But when you're acting on the feedback, act on trends, not one-off. So, you know, I can't tell you the amount of times I get in the same class, oh, the class was too fast. Oh, it was too slow. It wasn't deep enough. It was too deep. And so I would gather all that feedback and start to see what the trends are. So if there's ongoing trends of this class is too fast, then I would slow it down. But if every class I'm chopping and changing as a result of the feedback from the last class, I'm actually not, you know, moving forward. So you might get some folks who are really negative. You know, that person might just be an outlier. Don't take it too personally. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you always want the follow-up, but it's even more important in the virtual setting because what happens is, you don't have the over lunch, people sort of can casually talk to you, or as you're leaving the room to go take a walk or use the restroom, and somebody says, "Oh, hey, by the way," and they give you, "I really like that one section, but is there any reason why we didn't cover this or that?" etc. And so giving people the opportunity to have that with that follow-up survey, even if it's just a reply back to you or a free form text box, is really important. And so as opposed, you just don't get those casual, "Oh, hey, you just happened to walk by me," kind of give some feedback.
Great. I was just typing in the chat, the timer online that I've used. So these are the remote training best practices. So change, design, prepare, deliver, and review. And whether your remote classes are a temporary replacement or a permanent fixture, training customers remotely brings a new level of opportunity and flexibility to your business and to your customers. And we hope that this session empowers you to get out there and make a difference, and it gives you the tools you need to design, prepare, deliver, and review your remote delivery and help your internal teams and customers adapt to the change. And so now we'd like to open it up to Q&A. So you can type your questions in the Q&A box or the chat, and Eric will moderate. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ryan and Donna. I think that we're on perfect time. We have 15 minutes for some questions and answers. It seems like we've had a few questions come in. Obviously, the chat box is also super busy with a lot of interaction, which is great. And so, one question that we had been discussing that I'm sort of curious about is, when you're talking about the transition to remote training, a lot of times in the business today, there's a lot of conversation about personal touch. And so, what sort of business case do you can you explain to leadership when it comes to moving to remote training? What's the actual business value, and how do you explain that when you're helping leadership understand why it's beneficial to move or to incorporate some remote training into your program?
So is that the leadership internally or at customers?
Internally.
Yeah. So yeah, it provides a lot more flexibility. If you have a team of instructors, you're not, trying to manage where in the world they are if they are able to travel. So you don't have all this bench time or trying to manage all the resource and scheduling. I mean, I've worked with companies where they have a full-time person just scheduling all the instructors, for where in the world they are. So that makes it a lot easier. It's something you may not want to emphasize right now, but it is much higher margins than classroom training. Let's say if an instructor is flying somewhere, they lose a day on either end to deliver a 2-day class. It's costing you 4 days to deliver a 2-day class, and they can be doing, 2 or 3 different classes from home, and you're not paying all these external expenses, and the margins are awesome. It's great, especially if you're running a P&L. But it just adds so much flexibility.
Yeah, and I think about that personal touch aspect, right? That's why it's VILT, or live online, right? You still have the personality there. You still have the subject matter expert. You still have the questions being asked, as opposed to the on-demand self-paced stuff that, we were differentiating from at the beginning that Donna was. And so, that's what it's about, right? People love to know that they have an expert up there helping them and teaching them and guiding them through the experience. And I just drive that point home.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Thanks, Donna. So we have a lot of questions that are coming in, both in the chat and the Q&A. So let's try to get to as many of these as possible. Tricia asks, what kind of goals should you set when receiving feedback from training? Positive remarks from trainees, or is there something more specific that you should look for?
Well, definitely you want to get some kind of feedback. I like to ask, how was the pace? Was the content valuable? There's the 4 or 5 levels of Kirkpatrick measures of training. So there's, you can get pretty deep there. You can follow up and see what the retention was like. You might have quizzes. You might be able to roll out some quizzes during or after the training. So it really depends on what's important to you. You might have your training be part of a learning pathway that leads to a badge or certification. So there's all, it's really about what's important to your learners.
The goals I look at to get out of the feedback from the training is, what actionable items I'm going to take to change the course or the curriculum, right? So from the course and curriculum, what was the amount of time for the labs? Too little, about right, too much. What was the amount of time for the lecture? Too little, all those kind of things. And you layer in the platform, the virtual platform for it. Did the platform help, or not help you? What feature was missing? And so on and so forth, so that I can actually, run graphs and reports and say, over the past year or 6 months, looks like our labs are running a little too short, or we need 2 people with a little time, and adjust accordingly.
And yeah, and that reminds me, I also like to ask, was the instructor knowledgeable? Did they listen? Were they present? So that helps me to see how instructors are doing during the remote delivery.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have is from Catherine, and she said that she's looking for training tips for users with diverse technical proficiencies or language barriers, or if there's, if some of them have a resistance to change. So if you have any best tips about dealing with those sorts of situations, that would be great.
Well, some thoughts I have are that you might have a getting started class. Well, first of all, even before that, you might have a how to do remote training. So it might be a 15-minute session just to help people feel comfortable, really break it down. If the skill sets amongst your participants vary greatly, then you might want to build really, rather than having one general course, have a getting started course or a deeper dive course. So you really break it out. I found that at a previous company I worked at, where some people were always saying, oh, it's too slow, and some were saying it was too fast. So rather than having this monolithic course, really built out, here's the basics, and help people get up to speed. Then they can take that as many times as they like, and when they're ready, they can go into the more advanced stuff that we might have covered in the 3rd day of a 4-day class. And then the folks who already know those basics can just jump into that more advanced session. So really that modularizing is going to help a lot.
Yeah, one other thing I would mention, there's a lot of topics there in that question for sure, but sometimes people are resistant to the virtual training, but they haven't actually seen one in action, and everybody's is a little different. So a lot of times I'll do small, maybe 1 minute to 2 minute YouTube style recordings showcasing snippets from the training that I've done, either with mocked it with colleagues or whatever, and say, here's what you can expect your experience to be like. And a lot of times that seeing it, really solidifies for people and makes them less afraid of it.
I think that makes good sense. Thanks, guys. Another question I'd be remiss not to ask is, does Strigo integrate with other platforms to unify the delivery experience, i.e. labs, web conferencing, etc., or does Strigo come with these tools embedded? And that's Matt asking. So our virtual classroom comes with all those tools embedded. The way that it works is that students get a single link URL that opens the classroom in a web browser. And then once inside, Strigo automatically generates a lab for each student. So during training, trainers can follow students as they progress. You can see you can collaborate with them, enter into their labs, help them move along, and be able to interface within the classroom, be able to communicate via video, obviously discuss, through verbal discussion as well, and you also are able to monitor their progress. So thanks for that question, Matt. Next question that we have, and again, we have a lot of them. Alex is asking, do you have recommendations for sales teams on how to push for remote training as opposed to on-site, other than the argument for cost savings?
Well, that's where the go-to-market comes in. And let me see if I can find the right slide for that. But that's where the go-to-market comes in. So I have a saying, so there we go, that's go-to-market. I have a saying from the Field of Dreams movie, if you build it, they won't come. So just because you have a new offering doesn't mean the sales reps are going to sell it, that the customers are going to know about it, that they're going to come to it. So that's where you build out a go-to-market plan where you really define what your offerings are and the benefits and the audiences, and then build out sales and marketing assets and communication for internal teams like sales as well as customers. So that's a huge topic on its own, and I have I have an article I've written on that. We can send a link to that, and then we're looking at doing a webinar on that if there's interest.
Great.
Yeah, and for me, I drive home that scheduling aspect of like, we can get you scheduled in and get you trained virtually, usually on a factor of 2 to 3x quicker turnaround time if you go that route than if we have to coordinate scheduling in person.
Cool. So we've got a couple questions about labs. Samantha's asking if you can sort of give an example of a lab. And Joris is asking, what's the sort of possibility? What sort of things are you able to teach or do within a lab? And what are some of the things that you're limited in doing when you're in a lab?
You want to start, Ryan?
Sure. So labs, can be everything from non-technical style labs where you are getting, pulling down maybe copies of data and crunching numbers and coming to conclusions, to actual, which is one of the things I do in my wheelhouse in the tech world, which is, actually installing and using software. And so in general in the labs, typical good examples are if you're trying to learn how something works or how something behaves, you do the set it up, use it, break it, right? So we want to set the thing up, see what's involved. There's the easy way and the hard way. You want to try to use it and see the benefit of whatever that software is or you're trying to teach. And then you want to say, okay, well, what happens in the broken scenarios? What if I put bad data in? What if I take a server down, etc.? So you can actually do quite a bit. And the big thing is to just stay true to the learning goal, right? Sometimes the amount of effort that a student might have to put in to actually, let's say your goal is to simulate a failure. Well, you don't want 40 to 50% of the work that they have to do is just setting everything up to simulate the failure, right? Because you just want to see the failure. So you can automate that part. You can hide it from them. They maybe run a script and they can go look at it if they want, but they're not really set doing that stuff. They're actually time is spent with the goal, which is seeing what happens and maybe how to recover from it. I know we could talk for a long time on that, but I hope that gives a little bit of flavor to it.
And I'll just add, that when you know what the jobs to be done are and you define clear learning objectives, then it's really clear on what the exercises need to be. They're exercises, hands-on labs. And so, for example, for companies that have reporting and analytics, I would start the class with some pre-built reports in the training environment, and then start with users accessing those existing reports, and then doing some analytics from those existing reports, drilling in. And then they start to build some simple reports, and then they build, so each time they're building off of the last lab, building more and more complex stuff that they can really customize and configure. And then what we did in the training environment, if somebody was behind on a lab or couldn't quite get things to work, we had that finished product. It was, a special reporting file. And so you could just open up that and then you'd be ready to go in a like more advanced lab. I've done that with business users. I've worked with developers at big data companies. So you're in there coding and you've got the database set up and you're able to pull your results with integration and development tools like Sauce Labs, Docker. You really can get complex. As I said, you can have like development environments. You can have server and client environments interacting, databases. It can be quite robust. But the main thing is you're creating some real life scenarios that are relevant to their jobs and relevant to what you're teaching them. So they're not just hearing you and seeing you, they're doing it, which increases the retention.
Okay, well, I have some great news and some bad news. The great news is we have still a lot of wonderful questions that are popping up. People are really, really engaged, which is fantastic. But unfortunately, we're starting to run out of time. So I think we can try to tackle possibly one more question. And then what we'll do is we'll go offline and work over the next couple of days to make sure that we respond to all the other great questions that all the attendees are sending.
Great, yeah, we can write up an article with the questions and the answers.
Absolutely, that'll be a lot of fun. So I think for the last question, we'll give it to April. She actually has a couple quick questions, and they're about slides. So the first part of the question is, is there a big difference between the kind of slides you would use in an ILT modality or session versus a virtual ILT session? And the second question is, are there any tips on striking a balance between how much text you put in the slides and what you speak to? So if you guys want to answer those two questions about slides, that would be great.
Go ahead, Ryan, why don't you take that?
Sure, yeah. So let me start with the text versus like how much text to put on slides. I've always viewed the text on slides to be a backdrop to the story being told, right? Or something to point at to reference if it's code snippets or a diagram. But from a text perspective, words, they're really talking points. And I'm telling the story and the slides are navigating the story. I'm not putting the text on the slides to actually give you the information necessarily. It's to guide the story. And I find that helps if the attendees are, they don't have this struggle going on in their mind to say, well, should I be listening to the person delivering the training or should I be reading the slides? It's more of they're there, they're a guide, etc. It also helps ensure that if you have a large training staff, well, they have to learn that story as opposed to read the story. There's definitely different opinions on this, but that's what I have found gives the best impact in my personal experience. Go ahead.
Well, can I just add something to that before you continue? Well, like when I've joined some teams, I've seen, okay, there was 9 slides with screenshots of the toolbar. Like you do not, so if you create all these heavy screenshotted slides, then every time your product updates, you have to update them all. And rather than walking through 9 slides to talk about a toolbar, be in the app, show the app. So I'm a fan of minimal slides, introduce the topic, show what's going on in the product and get them hands-on, as Ryan said, 50% at least labs. So keep the slides simple and you're not creating a manual. They're gonna learn by doing.
On the second part of that question, which was what might you put different on the slides for virtual versus in person? And, I tend to say the content is basically the same. It's more about the flow. So I mentioned before, like wanting to have long pauses and being careful about when I ask a question or not. Many times in your courses, you prompt certain questions where you're trying to drive home a point. What do you think would happen here or this or that? So I would add slides that are like pop up the question and you can use it as a transition slide to actually help everybody know that that's what you're wanting to do. And so I tend to do the difference that way from a text perspective. And then the other part was if I whiteboard something, normally I would whiteboard in the training. I make sure to have an end state diagram of what I would whiteboard so that people can go back and reference it.
Okay, well, I think that's all the time we have for questions and answers. Again, we'll put together a blog entry or some document. We'll work to make sure that we're answering all the other great questions that unfortunately we didn't have time to get to today. But again, it was a really, really interactive session, which is great. So first of all, I want to thank all the attendees for taking time out of your afternoon, evening, or morning to join us. Also, Donna and Ryan, thank you very, very much for all these wonderful insights and tips. I thought it was really, really valuable. And, I've left here our contact information. So everybody here is, more than welcome to reach out to us with additional comments, questions, feedback. Share with us how you're, doing your customer training. We want to keep that conversation going. We'll also be making a recording of this webinar available so that you can use it for reference or share it with some of your colleagues. And again, it's been a wonderful session. Thank you all for your time, and have a great day.
Thank you. And just reach out if you have any questions. You've got our contact info here, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure. Take care.
Bye-bye.